know a lot about native plants and are producing for a lot of restoration projects. They've brought some leaflets at the back here, so if anyone wants to find out more, with Atlantic Harvest. So shall I let you kick off? Sure. Jeremy, thanks very much. And we've also got Jim to come back. Hooray! Hi, Jim.
Hi everyone.
So if Jim and Tom, if you have questions, you just sing out, because we won't be able to see your faces. So just shout at us as we go through.
Afternoon, everyone. So Jeremy, my wife and I run Atlantic Harvest out in the house. Mostly vegetables to begin with, but we're getting more and more into natives at the moment. So I thought we'd do a little presentation, show you what we're doing out there, and everything from the propagating side of things all the way out to planting them out in the field. So, seen as a bit of a funny question, a bit of an obvious question, what is restoration exactly? But it's something I think that could be looked at in a bit more detail. Like what areas can and should be restored, because everyone knows what eroded tussock areas look like. Then you've got the clay patches, which are relatively stable. They're not really going anywhere. Eventually they'll leach away and you'll lose them down to the rocks. But for now they're fairly stable. Diddle-dee monoculture, that's another form of restoration, even though you've got plants growing on it and it seems healthy. Monocultures generally aren't healthy. You sort of want a bit of plant diversity in there. Something to take over if you get something like diddle-dee dieback, because once all the plants go, you've literally got nothing there that'll recover. Wetlands, when you talk about peat restoration elsewhere in the world, you're going to be thinking wet peat, stagnant moss fields, that kind of thing. Whereas here, wetlands, well, if it's damp and in a valley, it probably doesn't need any restoration because it's going to have vegetation growing on it. So it's safe to say out of all of that, the areas that really need looking at first are eroding tussock. You look at the black ground, it's losing a lot of soil very quickly, and it's one of the easiest ones to plant up. So a lot of work's been done over many years with tussock in the Falklands. Most recently on Hummock Island, so Sally and Ken have done amazing work with hectares and hectares there. And it's actually getting to the point now where it's taking off on its own. It's rewilding the island naturally. And they achieve that with looking at what works, and you keep going back. You look at what happens, like you pick your tussock tillers, where they get sourced from, the ground type, the soil, the depth, the humidity. And you find out what works, and more importantly, you go back. You keep going back every year, you fill it in, you look at what works, and you just carry on from there, and then, eventually it should look after itself. So the other benefit of tussock is that it's basically free. Like if you've got a big plantation of it somewhere, there's masses of stock material that you can use. So with that little intro, we'll move on to what we do. So we've got a setup out at New House with capacity to grow a significant amount. So we originally started with tussock tillers, and it was you, friend, that encouraged us to get more into the other grasses, really. And I'm glad we did, because demand for tussock tillers has dwindled quite a lot in the last few years. It's not as successful as actually dividing tillers up out in the field. Like you get a better success rate with tillers than you do with seedlings growing like this. It's not great advertising for us, but it does still have a place. If you go out with 2,000 tussock seedlings and you plant them in an area where there aren't any available natural tillers to divide up, you can get that done in a day with a group of people, basically. And then go back the following year or the year after, and you've got enough tussock to do hectares. Absolute hectares, because you've established that little nursery right there, right next to the area that you want to restore. Whereas in a lot of cases with remote areas where the tussock's very poor and there isn't any, you can spend days and days collecting from somewhere else, usually shipping it by boat or long distances by vehicle. Yeah, so our other plants that we grow, bluegrass. Again, different area to tussock. You can't plant bluegrass in tussock soil. It's more about natural sandgrass. It's drainage. Coastal areas stops the sand erosion. Fighting cooch, that seems to grow just about anywhere. Even clay patches. We planted some 2 years ago at home, and they're still growing. Not much. They're not dying, but they are actually surviving in clay, so that could be a long-term solution for eroded clay. Boxwood for your coastal areas, swordgrass, cinnamon grass, good for the damp areas as well, and good for the diversity, so swordgrass can go in amongst tussock, so add a bit more diversity and break up the monoculture a bit. Cinnamon grass could have quite a good potential for riverbanks, where it can trap eroding or scouring soil running down in winter time as it works. It's got a good root structure. Diddledy dieback too, that is the sort of ground it could grow in. Yeah, you've had luck with that, haven't you? Yeah. So we grow a bunch of other natives as well. Some of them are still trying to get the propagation method effective. Fascines very elusive. I think Cynthia's had better luck with divisions or cuttings than we do with seed. It's very, very specific temperatures. So California club rush, got masses of that for our own project this year. Wavy hairgrass is another one I'm trying to do at the moment, so that's going to have massive benefit, I think. It's a perennial, it self-sets, and at new house that hasn't been grazed for a few years, you're actually seeing it pushing out and replacing the diddledy. Like it's almost like it's reverting back to what it would naturally be as grass. Small and tall fern, I've not intentionally grown them, but you have them growing. But you see a lot of tall fern on mountainsides. You just see the bogs left over and it's completely gone. And having seedlings like this could be a way of introducing it to mountainsides. And a bunch of other natives. They're just more for ornamental value, really. Yeah, pale maidens and whatnot, and some of it could also be used for restoration, just in small quantities, as some of the rarer ones, like the Waving saxifrage or plantains.
How successful is your pale maiden?
Very successful, but you need a lot of pre-treatment for it. So once it gets going, you can't get rid of it. It's a weed, basically. Yeah, so this is our setup. So this was Springcreek very kindly donated some grant money towards helping build this, facilitated by conservation. So we have specialist machinery for it. We've got Nissen hut for packaging and processing, attached greenhouse, almost enough weed matting. And the latest addition was a new greenhouse that got moved in there this weekend. Some people in this room are helping us with that. And in this top corner up here is a hardening off area for plants that have just come out of the polytunnels for growth. So we get them all growing in their own tunnel, insulated, just to get the germination going, and then they get transplanted into root drainer trays, and then they're moved into this little greenhouse. You can see the ones on the right have just been moved in, and then when they reach that size on the left, then they go outside to harden off. They've basically been growing in the tropics, so they're weak as anything. They need that shelter. They need quite a lot of adapting before they're ready to go outside into the exposed wild. At every stage they get moved, they get weeded. Lots of watering, a lot of watering. It's 800 litres we used last year on these, and it's probably going to be even more this time. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't built that pond that I spoke about at a talk here in November last year. And that's actually kept our water levels, capacity for it. So biosecurity is a very big risk with seedlings, and one of the ways around that is using locally made potting compost. So the weeds that I'm pulling out, they're not actually introduced weeds, talking sort of peatbog grass or the juncus brush that we know it as, small ferns, diddle-dee, Christmas bush. To be honest, they could stay in and they would probably be quite beneficial, but looks better when they're out. As they're growing, there's a lot of potential pests that can come in, so the whole area has boundary sprays to stop earwigs coming in. And it's not just earwigs, there are lots of other insects. You've got green fly, you've got slugs and snails, and all sorts that have the potential to head out to the remote islands or the areas it's getting planted. Rust is also a very big problem. So it's everywhere in the Falklands, it's airborne. But in a nursery setting like this, in that picture, you've probably got upwards of 10,000 square metres of grass leaf area, and that's a lot of areas for the rust spores to land on. Another stage of biosecurity is the packing. So they all come back into the Nissen hut, and then every one of them gets pulled out and inspected. So if there's a little chamber of air at the bottom, something could be hiding in there. They get put aside. Only the really healthy ones get wrapped up, Swiss roll style with cling film. That really helps because you're minimising the amount of roots touching each other. If you wrap them all up in one bundle, you just have one giant plug, which is really handy when you get to the other end. So once they're in the boxes, they're basically flat packed, easy to move, bundles of 25, easy to carry around and put out in the field. Yes, when it comes to planting in the field, again, you've got to pick the right sites. So tussock, obviously in tussock areas, or somewhere where the soil's deep, non-mineral based, then you bluegrass. This is a very good example. This was taken on Emily's land at Little Creek at Golden's Head. So you've got 3 different areas of possible erosion. I mean, it's not eroded, there is vegetation there, but if there wasn't, you'd have tussock on top of that deep peat bank. Bluegrass in amongst that moving sand that's building up around it, just to trap the eroding particles. Bluegrass is also very resistant to sandblasting. And then in your clay areas, which is still a decent amount of mineral soil, you'd have waiting cooch in amongst that. And on the right hand picture is boxwood planted on Hummock Island. That's like a steep ravine where the water rushes down and scours the soil away. Not deep for tussock. Planting techniques, there's different ways of planting. So one of the biggest problems with certain areas of tussock especially is you break up that ground and you're actually destroying a lot more of that peat pan, which then washes away and blows away. So there's a chance that you can end up doing more damage, especially if the plants don't take. So ways around that are using narrower spades, post hole digger, very effective. Takes a little bit longer, but depending on the ground, especially if you're planting in pure peat, you need one of these. And it's a lot better than digging with a spade, it's a certain. Swordgrass, that's a good one to plant in amongst tussock, like I mentioned earlier. However, geese, you've always got a problem with pests, and geese are an absolute nightmare when it comes to a lot of the natives, especially swordgrass. So ways around that are planting them closer, right up in amongst the tussock. Eventually, once the tussock forms, is dense enough and is high enough, the geese dislike going in there because they can't actually take off and they don't have a predator going for them. Hares, that's another one that's quite a big problem. So this again is taken on Emily's land. And the tussock's doing really well in there. That's because it's surrounded with rabbit wire fencing. Outside of that, there's not a lot of tussock. So it does pay to try and keep animals off. So what's the future for us? Well, continue with seedlings, but this whole area behind our native setup, there's about 4 hectares there. That's going to be fenced off with rabbit wire, and there's going to be big fields of natives, mostly tussock, bluegrass, waiting cooch, and we're talking large-scale seed collection, not just for ourselves, but also for You take several kilos of it, put it in the back of a tractor hopper, and you can direct drill diddly dieback areas, or even just carry a bag around in a restoration area and broadcast the seed, really. So I'd also like to see other little seed hubs popping up with some of the rarer species. So we've got an established population of plants that are becoming quite endangered. So you know they're growing in the wild, you know that there's seed there. And different habitats as well. So one of the ones we're working on is the pond that we built last year. It was very successful, not just for water, but the amount of vegetation growth below there is phenomenal. And as a result of the constant water flow throughout summer, this existing pond down here maintained its water level at the same height. And the club rush that I had growing there tripled in mass. It was just the perfect environment for it. So we have a project in February, and way down to the south of our land, we don't have a great deal of land, but it's still way down there for us, is a large lake that's going to be built. So this will be about 15,000 square meters. There's a river that runs through there constantly, so it'll be constantly renewed water. So islands will be formed, lots of club rush. It'll be like an archetype for California club rush, because in the event that it is dying off elsewhere, then you've got a good supply of it there. Habitat for birds, swans, hopefully. Yeah, no, it's going to look quite good when it's all done. Yeah, and that's basically the end of my talk, I think. How did I do?
Brilliant.
A little bit earlier.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's really interesting. Brilliant. We'll have Sacha and then we'll go for questions, if that's all right.
Okay.
So Sacha's coming to teach us how we can all do something in our back garden.
We'll teach you how to kill things in your backyard.
Thank you very much.
That's where I get my desktop. Right, there. Thanks. Doesn't work. Backwards and forwards. Brilliant, thanks. Hello everyone. There's only a couple of people I would choose not to do a talk on my propagation skills. One would be Jeremy, and I think the other one one of the other ones would be Turtle of the West. I actually went to see Turtle and asked him for some advice on growing boxwoods, and he had one line of advice which was, "Boxwoods? Ah, they grow like weeds in my garden." That was about as far as I got. So I did go around, and one of the things I was interested when we first arrived in the Falklands, we moved into Stanley, and our garden had very little in it and very few plants. So I went off down to Stanley Nurseries and had a chat with the lovely Cynthia Williams, who's also got very green fingers, like Jeremy, and she sold me some boxwood plants and also some Falklands lavender, which was great. And I ran out of budget fairly quickly because I bought too much, and so I suddenly thought, well, maybe I could try and have a go myself. And so I started off, with very little knowledge. But I did go and have a chat with a few people. One of the people that I went to see was the other Don of Boxwoods, who is Sally Blake, who some of you might know. She had some really good advice, which was, be really mean to your boxwood. She said, don't be too nice to it, which is actually very good advice, as I found later on after I went completely against her advice and tried to be really nice to the boxwood that I was growing. I was quite keen on the boxwood because all the other plants were just a bit small, I thought, so I thought it would be good to have something big. And having come from the UK, there was lots of nice forests, I kind of missed having trees. The other place I went for advice was the Falklands Conservation website. So I think, Fryn, did you work on these? So Fryn did some brilliant guides, and they're still on the conservation website. This one was to how to grow native boxwood, and then there was another one which was how to store seed. And I haven't been very good at following Fryn's advice on this. So often I mean, I'm really good at killing things, so if you want to know how to kill any boxwood or how not to store seed, then I'm your man. And I didn't follow a lot of this, and I regretted not following it, but it was good fun finding out how to kill things in innovative ways. This is where it is on the website, or you can't see it here, but if you go to the download section on the home page, and then just down, there's a whole load of different sort of sub-menus, and there's one on habitat. Is it habitat restoration?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there you can find different downloads in there, which are really good and super practical and fun to read. My first foray into trying to grow my own boxwoods was doing it from cuttings. Sally had some really good advice on this, which I think, is this where you got? Did you get this advice from Sally originally? So she suggested pulling them off, pulling these little fresh branches off, so when they're still nice and bendy, current year's growth, pull them off and you get a little heel, which is really good because there's loads of growth hormone in there apparently. The little nodes here, I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but this is I got from the leaflet. The little nodes have produce loads of growth hormone. So you can either pull them off like that, or you can cut them off between the little nodes there, and then the nodes will sort of leach out little growth hormone, which turns into roots, hopefully. You can dip them into growth hormone into rooting powder or rooting gel, which I did try, but it didn't seem to make any difference one way or another to the results that I got. I was still pretty consistent in killing them fairly quickly. So yeah, this was the first operation we did of, I say we, Esther was doing the digital marketing at the back while I was doing most of the cutting. So we just found some boxwoods which we're pretty sure were native ones. They had nice white flowers out on Cape Pembroke. We were quite careful in not taking too many off the plant, and there's some good guidelines on that. Are they on the FC website as well on how to collect?
If you look at the plant code of conduct, which gives quite good advice, you need to ask landowners and how much you should collect to avoid damaging the plant or the population. So if you are going out collecting from the wild, then that's a good place to start for advice.
So what we did was we ended up stripping the leaves off on the FC guidelines. It says strip off about half of the stalk. We ended up stripping off quite a lot more because we found that the more leaves you had on there, the more it stressed your little twig. And actually, it's all you want to get rid of all that evaporation because it hasn't got any roots to absorb water. So we actually ended up stripping off 2/3 and got better results with that, which was interesting. And then we also tried cutting really carefully. By the end of it, I was just breaking them off, and I got fed up. It actually didn't really seem to make a great deal of difference either. Back to the Sally Blake maxim of treat them badly seemed to work quite well for us. Another way of treating them badly was to build a greenhouse and then forget to put the roof on. So I put them in these little seed trays, and they didn't really seem to mind at all. They just were quite happy in there. Once I put the roof on, they all died. So again, yeah, don't be too nice to them. Sally's advice was put your cuttings in a pot and stick them under a hedge and forget about them, which was actually completely brilliant advice because it keeps the sun off them. It's nice and moist. It's a relatively stable environment, and she must have known what she was talking about. We then tried all sorts of different pots. We tried to recycle. We used quite a lot of milk cartons. I found they sweated in there quite a lot, and actually the distance between the middle of the soil and the outside was actually relatively small, so you get quite a lot of heat fluctuations. At least that's what I said to myself after I'd killed a whole load in milk cartons. So we moved on from milk cartons. We also tried Stanley Dairy yogurt pots, which I successfully managed to kill all those ones as well. Again, I think they were just getting too hot, and it's just not a very stable environment. Imagine Jeremy's hair is probably standing on end watching all of this, these goings on. But it was quite. I started trying to think like a boxwood, And I was trying to figure out what the roots were like, so I put some in water to have a look to see what the very freshest roots look like, and they're really fine and probably dry out quite quickly. So I was trying to figure out what medium would be best, what soil to put them in would be best. So I tried lots of different things. Oh, that's more just showing you what happens, all those fine roots when they get a bit bigger. But I tried half gravel, half soil from the back garden. That seemed to grow fine. I even pushed it and did 100% sand. They seemed fine with that as well. So in the end, it didn't really seem to matter what I grew them in. I just had to find other ways of killing them other than what I planted them in. Having started with the smaller pots, I thought, well, maybe it'd be better trying in a bigger pot. So I found small pots in the back, small containers in the back garden. Tried this, and this actually worked quite well. Good big mass of soil, keeps the moisture in, relatively stable environment compared to the small pots anyway. And then I tried to control the humidity by putting plastic over the top. That killed most of those ones, I think, quite effectively. So I didn't do that again. And then I ended up trying to get bigger pots. So I went down to Mary Hill Shopping Centre and found some cube tanks. So cut cube tanks in half, washed those out, cleaned those out, and then put lots of cuttings directly into there. That worked really well. Until Kat started using it as a litter tray from next door and fertilising it very helpfully and knocking them all out, but I ended up just popping them all back in again, and they seem to work fine. So I ended up putting netting, the green netting. What's that netting called? The stuff you get from Stanley Growers.
Green netting.
Green netting. So I put green netting over the top, and it turned out that green netting was totally brilliant for having a nice environment, and they grew really well under the green netting. And I put this in the sort of southeast aspect, so I didn't get any direct sun, or as little direct sun as I could get, a little bit. And then I tried putting 2 layers of green netting over top, and that worked really well. That was my equivalent of a hedge, and that's what I've had best results with that. So having got quite bored of cutting endless amounts of twigs, I thought, oh, maybe have a go at the seeds. So I went out to the same bushes that I'd collected from previously about June time, and picked a whole load of the little pods, put them in some trays, which I put on top of the fridge to dry out slowly, not too hot, and they dried out quite well. I then found an upgraded helper who was more effective and less into digital marketing. And we got the colander out, or the sieve, and we sort of shook them around in the sieve. After we took them out of the trays, shook them around in the sieve, got the seed out into a bowl, and actually ended up with quite a lot. And they're absolute tiny seeds. I actually got 4 little packets if anybody wants some. We'll put them on the back if anybody wants to try some. And we got loads of it out. And so that was the next stage. We upgraded, and I made a planter out of some old packing cases that I've got from the power station. I think it's from the power station. Oh, no, sorry, maybe these were the packing cases that some of the lights on the front road on Ross Road came in. I spoke to PWD and they gave me some more packing cases, which was great. And then we planted them all out into these with two layers of netting over the top, and got really good results. I can't remember how many was in there, but there's probably 400, 500, 600 in there, which is great. And actually a relatively small area, you can get quite a lot done, which is really good. And I had 2 of these, which was good. And I got soil from, I can't remember where they borrowed and stolen the soil from. But it meant that the soil wasn't particularly, I hadn't done a really good job, which is what Jeremy had done, which was to sterilise the soil and have a really good sort of biosecure growing medium. So when it came to harvesting time, there you can see the scepticism of our daughter, of my growing skills, but she carried on plugging away and helping out. So she helped get all these out. And what we ended up doing was turning them into bare root plants. So we just shook all the soil out, and then I dunked them underwater, the whole plant underwater, for quite a long time, which didn't seem to bother them at all. In fact, it seemed quite like it, sort of like quite nice moisture. I was also wondering about giving them a dunk in some bit of insecticide as well. Have you ever tried that, Jeremy? Using insecticide in water or anything?
We tend to just use the powder.
Just use the powder?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
right.
boxes at the end, there's just a light dusting in case something crawls in.
Okay, maybe that's a good thing to do then. Yeah. And then, yeah, so we turned them into bare root, into little bare root bushes. They got wrapped up in, a bit like Jeremy does, got wrapped up in some old rags, and then the rags were dunked in a bucket with some water at the bottom to keep them nice and moist, and that was really good for transportation. So it just kept these roots, which they dry out incredibly quickly. I found when we were pulling these out, if you left the ones out that you pulled out there, by the time you got to the other end of the thing, the roots had dried out. And you potentially kill your, that was another innovative way of killing them. So yeah, we're really careful on getting the soil out and then making sure they didn't dry out. So that was the technique that we used for stopping them drying out. This is a species I'm still by far the most effective at growing, but it is really nice to see some of the boxwoods that we've grown going out to some of the restoration islands. So some have gone out to Middle Island in Chisel Sound in a partnership between Falklands Conservation and George Seafoods, and then we found some friends who were willing to try them on their land as well. So this is, I don't know if you can see it, but the two, I can't remember what they're called now, the two peaks on either side of the entrance to Fox Bay. Do you know what they're called? Heads. The heads. That's it, yeah. So that was built, that's on East Head? No, that'll be on the West Head. So this is on the West Head on Keith and Nuala Knight's land. And then also these are the ones that went in about 3 years ago, I think, maybe on Middle Island, which is really nice. And for somebody who grows them in their backyard, it was just a really nice thing to be able to see them growing. And so I'll continue growing them at home, hopefully. See a bit more of this. And then this is the final picture I've got of them doing really well out on Middle Island. So hopefully there'll be a nice source of seed for the future. That's it.
Brilliant, thanks Sacha, that's great. You're all in your free time yourself. I think we'll see if Tom or Jim has got a question first, and then you're on the big screen now, Jim. Have you got any questions, Jim? Before we
Yeah, Tom had to leave.
yeah.
Tom had to leave. He sent a message. Another real question, but just great to see two great initiatives. I was just going to ask Jeremy, does he sort of do a site assessment for people? Will he go out and somebody will say, look, I've got a piece of ground, and Jeremy obviously a lot of skill and experience. Now he's building that up. You're building that up a lot, obviously. Would you go out and do site assessments? And then on the boxwood, it would be nice, even rows of boxwood like that, just to cut down wind and reduce evapotranspiration. I think would make a really big difference in terms of establishing other plants too. But really good presentations. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Jim.
Yes, site assessments are something that could definitely be looked at the more restoration happens here.
Yeah.
It's like we need someone with sort of on in-field knowledge and where to go out and plant. It's like we've sent out tussock seedlings in the past, and they said, oh, we're not getting them again because they didn't grow.
Yeah.
Because they planted them on the wrong areas.
Wrong place.
Yeah, so it definitely would help. Like you want to maximise the success, don't you?
Yeah.
And as Jim said, shelter belts are a very good way of doing it. So
Yeah.
start a shelter belt out of another plant just to shelter whatever it is you're doing downwind from there.
Yeah. Did you catch that, Jim?
Yeah, I did, yeah. And just Jeremy's built up a very good sort of bank of knowledge and experience. If you could keep that recorded, and then you can really sort of helps refine just the criteria for different species and different sites, just all that feedback you get from people that attempt to do things. I always think that's important. Even if it fails, it's worth getting that recorded so you can just refine the knowledge on the way to go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else with questions?
Yeah, I just really got a comment for Sacha. saying that those that you planted, 3-4 years ago down the south coast, sort of Phillips Point area, the success rate actually has been very good. I think probably over 75% success rate. And they do seem to be holding up quite well. So.
Oh, that's good to hear. Oh, thanks, Brian.
Once they escape your clutches, they're fine. So.
I have a question for you both actually about boxwood. I am as good as you at killing everything. Sonia Falkland told me once with cutting boxwood you can't get wrong. I killed everything. And I had a bit of a doubt because you, Sacha, told me about for the seeds for boxwood. You said, as you said now, put them in shade, and the more shade the better. And Jeremy, the other day, I saw him, he said, no, heat and full sun. So now I don't know.
I think you know what the answer to that
is. And Brown said the same, shade.
I think it's a combination of both, isn't it? So if it's too dark and damp, it'll be too cold. So
for germination.
Germination.
Right. Yeah.
But then once they're sort of germinating, you're right, they don't need full sun, do they? But yeah, the germinating as soon as you've got like.
What do you germinate? Do you germinate like full sun, like or in the polytunnels?
In the polytunnels.
In the polytunnels.
Open trays.
Open trays. Yeah.
It's everything on the very top with the maximum exposure. They're the ones that germinate first.
Yeah. They might be very big and they're quite small.
No, they probably need light to germinate, I reckon.
Yeah. And water, you said also a lot of water.
Water. Yeah, even at any stage. Like, do you find that yours dry out a lot?
Yeah, and I've killed so many just by not watering them, just forgetting for a few days, which is really irritating.
They don't look like they're dying until they're dead.
Yeah.
So the answer was keep them hot when they're until they germinate, and then keep them in a little cooler, shadier place. Is that?
Yeah, what sort of temperature do you think it is in your polytunnels?
Goes anywhere from sort of 5 degrees up to 70 probably.
Yeah, okay.
I think it probably depends how much you want to water them. You know, if you're doing it like Jeremy, then you really do have to be attentive and water them every day. Whereas if you hide them under a hedge, it's probably a bit more relaxed. If you forget them for a few days, then they're not going to grow as fast, but they won't dry out either. So. But just asking a question, I mean, in your experience, are you doing any seed pre-treatments? I mean, a lot of, just for other people that have natural native seeds will have built-in dormancy, so you have to treat the seed before it can grow. So sometimes that might be a very hard seed that you have to kind of rough up a bit or stratify it so it's like cool and moist, and that kind of releases the chemical inhibition. So are you doing any pre-treatment?
Yeah, all of them need some sort of pre-treatment of one form or another. Some of it is just a number of weeks of how long they stay in a fridge that's within their growing medium, just to get them down. And then you need to sit them in some will stay in for 6 weeks. Like pale maidens will not germinate unless they had at least 4 weeks of full treatment.
That would be great knowledge to capture, because I never quite know how to deal with my boxwood seeds. Do you put your boxwood seeds in the fridge? Do you?
They're stored dry in the fridge, but I never sort of put them in the fridge before they get stored.
Jim, we've got a bit of feedback from you. Oh, there. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. One thing we didn't maybe say in the talk, but that the boxwood grows really well in, would you say in clay, and it doesn't need to go in peat. It's not as fussy as tussock, so we've found it to be quite useful along kind of beach banks and places to try and make a bit of shelter for the tussock behind it, perhaps, or to kind of stop the peat from eroding around beach banks. Or, like you said, sandy ground or shady ground. Or any more questions?
I've got a question for Jeremy, really. In the list of others, he had down wild raspberry. Is that known as anything else?
It is. That was a bit of a slip. I call them wild raspberries. So,
They do
it's a root. It's a rubus.
But it is what we know as the native straw.
Yes, it is.
That's what I just wanted to put something out there of
But just one thing, sorry. Following Sally's advice, and you showed it with the auger to drill for the tussock. We did it now for the couch.
Could I just ask a question?
Oh, sorry, Jim, we've just got one from Mary Paul, and then we'll let you in.
It's not a
Yeah.
question, it's just,
Okay.
so we used it, but not with a big auger, because we didn't have it, but we just bought one for like a drill, a hand
Oh, the
drill with a
little,
small battery.
yeah, the
And it
adapters
was
for
just brilliant. It was
Yeah.
very quick because you just go quick. And as you said, it doesn't break. Like even if I was trying to use the smaller scale, but with the it just went and it's just a perfect size.
It is, yeah.
And then you can go a bit more, a bit deeper because sometimes with the erosion or otherwise your seedlings, you have it at the top getting out. So we're just going to be deeper. We'll let you know if it works.
They're really using an auger is really good because very often you can actually drill down through the really harder subsurface. Yeah, boxwood and Falklands will grow in that, but it's so hard to get in there with a spade that very often you end up sliding it in at an angle. So it's and that's not great.
But actually the battery drill, it was great
Yeah,
and
they
not
are.
heavy and very easy and quick.
Yeah.
And it was in your report, Sally.
But how big is the value?
Jim, go ahead, Jim, with your question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there very much known about allelopathy in native plants in the Falklands? In other words, plants produce chemicals that actually repel other plants and won't grow with other plants, certain other plants. Do we know much about that? I mean, from your experience, have you got any knowledge of that or information on that, anybody?
I can't think of any natives that are allelopathic, but I know mouse-eared hawkweed is one of the invasive weeds.
I sometimes wonder about sorrel because it seems to kill things, but I don't know if that's maybe just the water. It maybe is just taking up the water. Not that it's native, but it seems to outcompete some of the natives when you plant them. But, yes. So no, we don't know. Is that what we're?
No.
I mean, the sorrels, it tends to sort of stabilise the ground and then it will eventually die off when it gets out-competed by the other natives. But if we look along the side of the Mount Pleasant Road, there are areas there that certain times of the year are all pink with them. But it is reducing.
Yeah.
I think every year the amount of sorrel along that road is reducing. It's been out-competed by white grass, etc.
Yeah.
Just another question. So
No, go for it.
Jeremy, I know some of the, especially conservation people are going to be very annoyed by my question, but about marram grass, I know it's not native, but it's so fantastic for erosion. Would you consider doing a bit, or just because we are doing a lot of tillers, but it's quite, sometimes you have to transport it quite a long way and it's hard work, but it's easier in the city.
Yeah, we have had a request for growing marram grass before. At the moment, we've got enough to do just with the natives, but it's definitely something that could be looked at. I think we're sort of at a point now where we kind of need assistance from introduced species to help stabilise them. You just look at York Bay. You maybe could stabilise that with our native sandgrass or bluegrass, as it were. But if it wasn't for that being there, you imagine what York Bay would look like without any sandgrass.
We did plant some marram grass in clay patches and everywhere where there was a little bit of almost nothing of soil, we put sandgrass and it takes in proper clay.
Yeah, no, there
It takes time.
are some fantastic introduced species, a bit invasive, but quite good, like lime grass. There's some very good ones.
Sorry, I don't want to marram, but no, you're pushing it.
Marram grass was actually introduced 100 years ago on the advice of Charles Hubbard. No, I don't know if Hubbard was here, but it was certainly on his advice, and that was 100 years ago. And it's certainly done the job, because, as you say, Cape Emerald would not look like it does today.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we've also seen on Villamore that the sandgrass there is now starting to be colonised by bluegrass. So it seems to be spreading within the Marram sandgrass dunes. So over time, it's quite possible that you'll get an increase in bluegrass, and it could perhaps even take over. So it's definitely worth trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Ronnie Laker was saying about Carcass on the west end. He said it was eroded before they planted marram grass, and then Tussock marram grass stabilized the sand, and then Tussock took over, and then you didn't see the sand. But sorry, Quinn.
But the area to the west of Surf Bay that Rebecca planted with bluegrass, etc. I mean, that was very successful in the sand.
Yeah.
So it does work. But okay, those dunes where she planted it weren't that large, and in fact the whole area has actually regenerated remarkably well after the mine clearance work. But you've only got to look there, you see that the bluegrass has been a success.
Yeah.
Yeah, the trouble with bluegrass is it just does not tolerate grazing. So wherever you've got animals,
Yeah.
you just won't give it a growth.
Yeah. And the hares on Cape Pembroke as well are
Yeah.
some bluegrass there. Anyone? Is that all the questions?
I'll just put in an extra along with nightfall. I think the best thing for deer food, that just spreads. And on diddle-dee, if you go into diddle-dee, it's just growing quite out of control. So if you want to stop erosion quickly, that's the way to go.
I don't know what to say.
So what grows on a high altitude? Because our cover on West Point is high up.
Yeah.
And we are, and Kitty has been trying marram grass. And yeah, it has not, we haven't seen any success there.
Yeah. I wonder, maybe your wavy head grass, randomly, I mean, you can see most species up high, can't you? It's probably the dry, would it be dry and windy?
It's
So-
the lot of willy balls.
Yeah, so
Picks
it's,
up, we have a lot of soil creep,
yeah,
and it's suffocating grasses lower down.
yeah,
It's a dry soil, and that's a problem. We have good grass, but it's being suffocated
yeah.
by soil being made on top.
The bluegrass, that, as Jeremy said, that's quite, it doesn't necessarily grow very fast, but it can take a lot of battering, can't it? And the waving boots, but more so the bluegrass. So, and I don't know, maybe, would you think maybe boxwood? Would you try boxwood? I mean,
We have quite a bit of boxwood
Yeah.
around.
yeah,
I mean, I hadn't seen it growing like that before, but when we did a survey around Port Howard Mountains, that's reflecting which growing up in the wash scars.
yeah,
And the bottom of the clay patches there where they're washing down the slope.
yeah,
Which wasn't habitat I'd seen it growing in before, so I was quite surprised. So it can grow up high, it can grow in pretty well drained,
yeah.
sandy, dry soil.
They can tolerate being dry, can't they? They'll come back from, but as Jeremy said, you probably need to plant lots of them because they don't bulk up quickly in bad environments, do they?
They're very slow, but once they get a foothold and they start seeding,
Yeah,
then they're very prolific seeders once they get going.
and they can persist as long as they're not grazed. They can persist through.
It's all comes down like the wavy hay grass that
Yeah.
will also grow on mineral soils as well as
Yeah.
peat soils. It's and self-sets prolifically, but it can't be grazed
Right.
like you see it at the populations we've got at Newhouse.
Yeah,
It's spreading everywhere until it hits the boundary fence and then it just stops.
yeah.
So there's just no
And
trace.
is it in a grazed area you're thinking of?
We closed off a part of the island,
Yeah,
so it's not grazing anymore.
yeah,
So we're starting to plant there, but
Yeah.
we're starting to plant different different grasses just to try out what is growing up there.
Yeah.
But the problem we have is the grub. That's the biggest problem of all, that it kills, it introduces Yorkshire fog, and once that's gone, then the soil is exposed and it all goes away. And we have so strong winds that we lose the soil quicker than what we can plant. And that's a problem. So we need actually something which grows very quickly.
Yeah. The cinnamon, if you can get cinnamon grass away, then that can spread. It spreads by rhizomes. So that if that will get away, then that is quick and it lays down a lot of leaf
put
matter.
some of that.
Yeah, you can almost dig up spadefuls and transplant it, but it does need a bit of moisture. It doesn't need to be as wet as you might think, but it does need some moisture. But that is probably, to my mind, if it's not suitable for tussock, for twigs thing, or marram, you know, the cinnamon and the marram. I don't know if anyone else. Phil, you've done quite a lot of planting, haven't you? Out of Vita. Yeah.
Tussocks.
Yeah.
I always go back to tussock because it's the one that you get the best results from. Everything
Yeah.
else, like Jeremy's saying, the bluegrass is very slow actually. The wave and cooch takes a long time to get established, but it does grow in clay, as you say, but it's not as rewarding as tussock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we didn't have much success in tussock. I know probably we had tussock, but already we are just like you, good at killing it. It grew very well, but struggling after 5 years, it started to, not 7 years. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
But maybe there is some, as you said, some sorrow. So is it sorrow maybe that is competing because it covered the ground? And then the tussock started separating. So is it the sorrow that is competing with the tussock?
I think with the small, my feeling was with the small tussock, the sorrel was nicking something from, whether it was taking the moisture or the tiny tussock seedlings couldn't compete very well with the, as Mike said, when they get bigger, they maybe can. Yeah, so big. Yeah. Tussock is fussy, isn't
So we have big patches which have been affected by the grub.
Yeah.
And the sorrel is the first
Colonized.
colonist. And so what kind of grass can one plant on top or in those sorrel areas? Are there any particular, because you can, it's difficult with tussock.
I think they will all grow in this, especially if you've got bigger ones, isn't it? The seedlings sometimes struggle, I think, to compete, but if you've got a tiller, but I would certainly give cinnamon grass a go because it's so easy to try if you can, just even a few spadefuls.
And flaking cooch.
And flaking, yeah.
I've seen that growing in dense sorrel patches, and it just doesn't seem to mind at all.
Yeah, and then if you've got any bluegrass, it's certainly worth giving bluegrass a go. But other people might have other ideas.
Maybe flourish?
Yeah.
It is supposed to be growing in wet areas, but we do have some in very high ground and just in parts that are really windy and they are thriving. So
yeah, we do actually, Mary Paul, as well. On our farm, there's quite high rush where it's not great. Yeah. Okay, well, probably time to wrap up. But thanks ever so much. I really appreciate those talks. It's a lot of time that goes into preparing them, so thank you very much. Thanks for coming.